Mike, it has been a wild ride in crypto land for the past several months.
Sure has.
Now that you're on the cusp of taking Galaxy public and Bitcoin is back at $8,000, thereabouts, how do you feel about the prospects for this industry?
I feel great. There's been like kind of a tale of two cities that have been going on. On the one hand, the Canadian crypto markets, public companies have traded poorly, and crypto in general has traded soft up until recently. On the other hand, the private markets for ICOs, for private equity transactions, are a raging bull market. Tons of money are pouring into venture capital funds. Silicon Valley has become Crypto Valley in some
Why the
degrees.
disparity?
Part of it is it's easier for an institution to make a bet in an illiquid venture fund than it is for them to buy coins. We don't have custody that they trust yet. Coins are volatile. Listen, if you had bought coins 3 months ago, you don't look so smart. They're down. And if you had put money in Andreessen's fund, yeah, you're still marked to market at zero or at flat. And so it's just an easier first step into it. You also have lots of money that's been raised are made by the Coinbases, by Block One, by Wobi, and you haven't even heard of some of these places. They have huge war chests. So they're bidding for crypto assets. And so I'd say it's a raging bull market in privates. I'd say it's a raging bull market in people that are coming into the space. If you look at a graph of people entering the space, it's straight up. And the talent entering the space is straight up. And I'd say it's a bull market at conferences. I just came back from Hong Kong. There were 15,000 people at Rise Hong Kong. I was at Beyond Blocks in Seoul, and I must have had my selfie taken 50 times.
So you leave me with an obvious question. If the private market for crypto and blockchain-related stuff is still that hot, why take Galaxy public?
Listen, we took Galaxy public in January when the public market was hot. This is a kind of a strange thing up in Canada. You do an RTO, we raised
reverse takeover.
Reverse takeover. We raised money in January. We won't start trading till August 1st. It took us a long time to go through the regulatory process. And so, in effect, we went public in January. And then there's been this blind spot when we'll start trading August 1st. And so in a normal, when we took Fortress public, we did the road show, we raised the capital, and we started trading a day and a half later. And so this is a pretty big gap between when we went public and when we're actually starting to trade.
So take me back to the rationale that inspired you to want to go public in the first place. What will Galaxy be able to do as a public company that you couldn't do when you were doing this out of your family office, which you were, or you couldn't do if you were raising private money?
So there were two things that inspired me. One was there were lots of companies that were going public up here in Canada that seemed to be not fully built out at high valuation and not really giving the public equity investor a real chance to play the whole ecosystem. And I thought, we have a real company. We are going to be a diverse ecosystem company, i.e. businesses in trading, asset management, and banking, and a portfolio that spans the whole group. So I was like, we're a perfect public equity for someone who just wants exposure. I'm trying to build a world-class company of talent, and to get the best talent in, it can't be Mike Novogratz's family office. And so it could have been a private Galaxy. We thought even better, equitize it, give people ownership, and go public, mostly to tap these capital markets, which were roaring. Now, unfortunately, the Canadian capital markets aren't roaring anymore, and so we've gone public. We're going to start trading in an environment where there's a pause in the Canadian capital markets. I have faith that they come back, and we're not just a Canadian company. We're going to trade all over the world at one point. We'll have buyers of our stock from Hong Kong to.
But you want to list in places like Hong Kong? You want to list in places like London?
You go start on the TSXV, and then next thing you're on the Toronto Stock Exchange. You probably then go to Frankfurt, London, and Hong Kong. Yes, we're going to be a global company. We want to be globally traded.
Listing in Canada was supposed to be easy, and it was supposed to be trouble-free, and it hasn't been either. Why?
Well,
what happened?
I think a couple things happened. There was a surge of companies that listed in Canada, and they all traded really poorly. And I think the regulators got a little bit more nervous and saying, hey, wait a minute, let's make sure we know what we're seeing here. We were a much bigger RTO than the other companies. We vended in, as they call it in Canada, about $300 million US worth of assets, and so valuing those assets and getting them audited. And in the long run, the Canadian regulators just spent more time with us, and they wanted us to have audited first quarter financials. We did that, and so now we're here. I think it was a constructive process for them and us, but it was a frustrating process.
I was going to say constructive perhaps, but it had to drive you crazy at the same time.
It was good for our lawyers who made lots of fees and learned a lot.
What kind of an impact did that delay have on the business, on your investors, maybe even on market conditions?
You know, it had some impact on our business in that for my legal and some of my leadership team, they spent a lot more time than we thought they would have on getting this deal through. And
so distraction.
So that was the distraction. From the rest of the business, it didn't. We have been building a banking business, a trading business, an asset management business. When I came up here in January, we were 19 employees. Today we're 73. So we've hired 50 odd employees. That process alone takes energy and effort. And
now that you've gone through it, what would you say? And you're not quite at the finish line, but you're close.
We're close.
What would you say are the pros and cons of using this shortcut to a public listing, right? This reverse takeover into a Canadian shell?
Listen, the pros are that you get to access capital markets a couple years before you would in other places, right? In the U.S., you need 2.5 years of audited financials. And in most jurisdictions, you do. And in this venture RTO play, you can take a new company public. And so the pro is you get access to robust capital markets. Ironically now, the private markets are more robust than the public markets. That was the opposite then. And so, with hindsight, maybe you would have done things differently. That's the biggest pro. And you get public. The cons are, public companies come with responsibilities and restrictions that, private companies don't have. And so there's always a trade-off.
You and I were talking about this months ago, and you were really excited. It sounds to me now like you might have a few regrets.
I wouldn't call them regrets. It's just realistic of where the public markets up here in Canada are. And so in January, February, you could have tapped the public markets for a tremendous amount of capital. Listen, you have a stock that trades at 2 times or 2.3 times book, and you can raise capital at better prices than that, and you're investing in assets that you're investing at even 0.7 times book because we get access to great environments. It's a wonderful business model. It really accretes money to the shareholders quickly.
What you're effectively saying is you didn't time the market well.
I wish we were public in November of last year.
Knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
That's a 50-50. If I knew what I knew now, when I knew the crypto markets were going to swoon as much and it was going to take so long, I might have stayed.
You knew the regulators were going to torture you.
I might have stayed private for another year or so and then gone public. But I don't think it's a mistake. There's an advantage now that we're public, even if the stock market is, the capital markets are weak now. 2 months from now, that could have turned, right? Part of this was a lot of companies that shouldn't have gone public went public up here.
Garbage companies?
Garbage companies or companies that were overvalued. And some of them were okay and others weren't.
Like what?
I don't want to specifically pick on these guys, but a lot of the mining companies were wildly overvalued when they went public.
Bitcoin mining stuff,
crypto mining companies. And that, I think, had a negative impact on overall sentiment. And so I think, listen, look forward a couple months, you get Bitcoin that'll move back towards 10,000. The rest of this enthusiasm that I see all over the globe shows up back here. You'll see the capital markets pick back up.
Let's talk for a moment about Bitcoin. It's in the $8,000 neighborhood right about now. You think that's a step on the way to 10,000 and maybe 12, or is it going to be another fake out like the May rally?
Let's hope not. So listen, I think there's two things. I think this rally is being generated by a few things. All that enthusiasm I talk about is slowly working its way back into the market, and I think we actually put a market bottom. I said that in Korea a week ago, and I say it now. Part of this is anticipation of an ETF that will hopefully get approved. If that ETF gets approved in the next few weeks, we're going to go to 10,000. I don't think we'll go through 10,000, however, because there's a big ceiling there. A lot of retail investors got caught buying at bad prices last November, December. And I don't think we'll go through 10,000 until we get custody solutions announced and implemented by trusted names.
The institutional infrastructure.
The institutional infrastructure. A lot of it's being built. Like when we started our trading thing, we needed an order management system. You got to build an order management system or hire someone to build it for you. And so all the stuff that institutions need to participate in this market is getting built, and it's getting built fast. And so it's not there yet, but it's really close.
What do you expect will happen to Galaxy stock once the listing is live?
You know, I've been asking all the Canadians. Listen, I think it's unrealistic to think that we went public at 5 and the crypto markets are down 60%, that we should still trade at 5. I would tell you, our company is far better today than it was when we listed. We were 20 people, we're now 73 people. We are active in each of our 4 business lines. We've made 11 new investments and 6 follow-on investments off our balance sheet into really excellent companies. We've traded well. We've preserved book. And so, we're a better company. The macro markets are lower. And so I think we'll probably end up settling in a little bit lower than our listing and hopefully reach an equilibrium and grow from there. It's not the same as an IPO because we IPO'd in January. And so this is like we IPO'd, it traded, no one saw where it traded, and now we're showing up out of the darkness in August. Does it make sense to you?
Your private placement investors have been locked up since January.
Since January.
And in the meantime, crypto's collapsed.
Yes.
And even if you've done a good job preserving book value, they still feel at the moment like they're licking their wounds. Is there anything to stop them from selling?
People make their own investment decisions. In general, when you sell lows and buy highs, it's not a great strategy. I've been telling
Says a career trader.
I've been telling investors up here after I give the pitch, I was like, so you want my advice? If the stock goes down, buy more. And I believe that. I honestly think 2 things. I think in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the complete decentralized crypto ecosystem, blockchain ecosystem, is going to be far, far more significant than it is today. And I think we are going to build a world-class company. So when I put those 2 things together, I feel far more comfortable where our stock price will be in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months than I will in the next 2 weeks.
If the stock trades down significantly, and I don't know how much that would be, would you mobilize some of your own personal capital to buy?
Once I'm unrestricted, this is another funny thing in Canada. Our next earnings is at the end of August, and so we're frozen until then. But of course, I would.
How is anybody supposed to value this thing?
It's hard to value. So we went public with a book that you'll get delayed response on, and a business plan of these businesses. Mm-hmm. And I think in Q1 19, you'll start seeing how each of these businesses are starting to generate real revenue, and we'll continue to try to build and talk about book. And so I think our stock will literally trade as a proxy. We're the only real public company where you can get exposure to the entire crypto ecosystem.
And that is an important point. Is it going to trade? Here's the thing. Are people going to value it at a multiple of book? Or are they just going to look at it as a proxy for Bitcoin or crypto in general? And if so, there's no incentive to value it at a multiple of book.
I think it 100% will trade at a multiple of book because you have a book of 45 different investments that people don't have access to start with. The normal equity investor can't get access to the portfolio we have. But you also have 3 other businesses that are generating revenue and that are going to be very profitable.
All generating revenue already?
They're generating revenue. They're not profitable, all of them yet, but they will all be profitable very soon. And so you'll have, and in some time in the future, you'll look at those businesses and you'll put a multiple on those businesses and you'll put a multiple on book.
At some point,
it'll be some of the parts. We're a year away from that.
So you started really with the macro trading business. That's what you began doing a few years ago.
Yep.
Right? Then you got into the private investment business. So those are very much live.
Right. Those are the 2 businesses that are robust right now.
And you're trying to build an advisory business?
We're building an advisory business. We've got the right team in place. We're hiring 1 or 2 more people. And, that's 2 parts. We already were in this business of helping people with white papers and giving advice. We're really moving into the more proper banking business. We're working on a merger opportunity right now. We're working on in the long run.
As an agent, you're in
as
between.
An agent, in between, with an advisory fee. Hopefully we sign a engagement letter soon, and that will be a nice piece of business. our real purpose in the long run will be to help raise capital for people in this system. The world, the crypto revolution, this decentralized movement, won't fulfill its destiny with $300 billion of market cap, right? It's going to need lots of capital, and we want to be the credentializer who raises capital for the best projects.
What about the asset management business?
Asset management is doing great. We have $450 million under management. We have
including not external capital.
External capital. So we have a $325 million venture account that operates in and around the EOS ecosystem, so it was a specific mandate. We have a cash management account, and then we have our Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index Fund, which tracks the index that we set up with Bloomberg.
So, a year from now, how much will you have in AUM? What do you figure?
A lot. I hope a lot more than we have now.
Of course you hope. But I'm trying to get a sense of what the ramp looks like.
Listen. I think we're not going to raise another venture fund because we have venture on our own balance sheet, and we have this EOS venture fund. I think the Bloomberg Galaxy Index is going to be one of those things where you're grinding in money and all of a sudden it hits an inflection, right? We are spending tons of time educating institutional investors about blockchain, about the space, and we're hoping that all that hard, elbow grease of education comes back, and when they start buying, this is a really good product for institutional investors. I laugh. I've got four sales guys. I call it the boiler room. They are on the phone. They are traveling all around the country and the globe, sitting with people and saying, hey, this is how it works. This is why you should invest. This is your first step in. And so, we raised more money this month and last month, and I have a feeling it's going to be a slow grind, and then it'll just pop. And so if it got to $500 million in a year, I'd be very excited.
Tell me about the next 6 months. What are your priorities?
We're building out Asia. I was just in Asia, and you can't be a crypto investment bank without being in Asia. 40% of the volume there, the excitement is there. And it had been...
In spite of the restrictions that the Chinese and others have put on crypto trading.
So Japan and Korea had really been gambling markets, if you want to think about it, just fierce trading markets. I think Japan will remain that. Their FSA put a little bit of a kibosh on it after the hack on the one exchange. No, not because there was another exchange that got hacked about 3 months ago. They've cleaned that up. Monex has bought that exchange. Monex is run by my old partner from Goldman Sachs, Ohi Matsumoto, who's a world-class entrepreneur. The FSA is putting, looking at each business and making sure the AML KYC stuff is more robust, that their offense and defense, because when you're in the crypto business, you've got to protect yourself from outside threats, but also from internal threats. This is a bearer instrument, and so you really want to have robust security. And so I think the FSA is doing a good job of getting the Japanese market in shape, ready to turn back on. And my guess is in the next 1 or 2 months, they're going to flip the switch, and you're going to see a lot more excitement out of Japan. Korea is actually more interesting in that while it's been a traders and macro market, I was shocked at how many people knew who I was because we'd been there, because they're macro guys, macro crypto guys. What's happening now, though, is their corporates, their senior corporates are saying, hey, we want to get into the blockchain. We want to get in this crypto space. And it's almost this reverse ICO idea. As opposed to the little guys starting it, the big guys.
You're talking about big Korean companies.
Big Korean companies.
The Chaebol?
Chaebol see part of their future in a decentralized space. And it made no sense being out. And they were like, listen, we see the future. Our artists are going to want to be on a decentralized platform. Our Uber drivers will want to be on a decentralized platform. So we want to own part of the decentralized platform. That's a way forward mindset than the CEOs in the U.S. at this point.
So you want to be there?
So we want to be there. We want to service those guys. We want to be part of that excitement. And then when you talk about Hong Kong, China, those companies are moving at light speed. I forgot I lived in Hong Kong for 6 years. It was so refreshing to be back because I was like, okay, we thought we were working fast. We're walking in molasses next to some of these companies. And so some of the biggest innovators are coming out of China. The government shut crypto down for a couple reasons. Most of it was the Chinese are such gamblers that they were very worried that their retail guy was going to get slaughtered. Pretty much
well, he did actually.
And he did. pretty much that was the regulator's response to retail around to crypto around the world. What's more interesting in China is there's this tension between the central government, which seems from afar, right? You've got Xi, who's decided to extend term limits and go from president to maybe emperor, and you've got all this data being concentrated between Alipay and WeChat, and there's a government clearing center which has all the spending data, and they've got AI that gets to plug in and gets to figure out exactly what people are doing. They've got cameras on all the corners. And so in some ways it feels like the makings of a totalitarian regime. On the other hand, all their regional governments are doing all they can to support blockchain initiatives. And so they haven't sorted that out yet. But I would tell you, I think this is an opinion, I think they are pro-blockchain because they know it's coming anyway.
I want to ask you about M&A. When we first started talking about this project, part of the reason to take Galaxy public was to create a currency to do acquisitions and fill out your portfolio, maybe buying an exchange. Where does that stand now?
Listen, we have capital on our balance sheet and we're constantly looking for investments. We haven't found a strategic acquisition yet, and we'll see where our currency trades or our equity trades and decide if we're going to use it for acquisition or not. But we certainly want to be a key player in this space.
A consolidator?
You know, right now we have 4 businesses that we want to keep growing before we start a 5th. If there's a chink in the armor, we approach this from an institutional perspective. Crypto is still 96% retail, and the guys that are making the most money right now are the guys that are plugged into retail. And so it wouldn't, if there was a natural next step, it would be to say, okay, let's either partner up with someone who's got the retail business or start our own.
You raised money. But I do wonder whether it's not possible that in between now and when these businesses that you're building really start firing, you might not have a bit of a cash burn problem. You had $10 million of OPEX in the first quarter, and that was with many fewer people. That number's only going up.
I look at Elon Musk as a hero. No, we're not that bad. Listen, I come from an environment. East Coast guys, we try to make enough money to fund our business, and I really think we will. Each of my business heads absolutely are focused on getting themselves profitable by first quarter. This year, we knew we were going to spend money on building out the business. We knew it would take a while. Listen, you don't just set up a trading desk overnight. There are regulatory hurdles to go through. There are licensing, there's hiring. And so we knew we'd burn money for the first 6 months, 8 months. That was part of the plan. But already asset management is paying for itself, and now you got to get trading and banking to pay for themselves.
Asset paying for itself means what?
Well, we have
Cash flow positive?
We have enough fees that come in to cover the broad cost of asset management. And so by the end of the year, I'm hoping all 3 of the businesses are at least cash flow positive or break even, and we go from there. And so we plan on burning money. I fundamentally believe that this is a big opportunity, and we're taking a long look at it. And so,
But people love the P2P, right? The path to profitability. You think you might be there. Cash flow positive is one thing. Net income positive.
Q2 of next year.
It's pretty quick.
Really do. Because, the trading business turns on and then you're in business. Now, right now, the driver of earnings literally is the balance sheet. And the balance sheet's tricky because how it gets marked in a 100 vol instrument is, we put our first quarter earnings out. They were March 31. It was the low tick of crypto. You've got a third-party marking agent who's new at this. You've got an auditor who is doing their best. Some of the companies don't have audits themselves, and so the auditors are in difficult positions. It's a very young industry, and so I would bet you within 12 months, all the auditors are much more sophisticated in crypto.
It's a learning curve for them.
It's just a learning curve for the auditors. It's a learning curve for the markers, and it's a learning curve for the participants.
At first, Mike, you described Galaxy as the Goldman Sachs of crypto. And then you refine that to the Drexel of crypto, which I get,
yes.
Right? You're creating, you're defining, you're shaping an industry the way Drexel did in junk bonds. Is that still the best way to describe what
It
you're
is. I
trying to
mean,
build?
we kid around because, Mike Milken, and he's had an amazing resurrection. He did go to jail. And the last thing I want to do is spend any time behind the bars. And so, but they did an amazing job of taking this idea and helping credentialize it and making it mainstream. And if you also look at the team he put together, they've been some of the stars of finance and really have reshaped the American landscape. And I think I'm putting an amazing team together. And so I would love in 20 years that, Chris Ferraro or Sam Engelbart are seen as the next Leon Black.
The next Leon Black, the next Tony Ressler, the
Yes.
next Kenny Moelis.
There you go.
That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Are you any less exuberant about this than when you started?
I'm not, I mean, it's frustrating that the equity markets here are soft and the crypto markets are softer, but I'm not less exuberant. The job is stunningly exciting. The banking assignments that we're looking at and the companies that we're talking to are looking at doing unbelievably creative things. And so even versus, my career as a macro trader, the intellectual curve here is so much steeper and so much more robust. This is going to be Web 3.0, and Web 3.0 is going to give people all this chance to define new business models. And, we're early, but I can see it every day when I go to work, the people that come through my office. And quite frankly, the audiences that I get. My trip through Hong Kong and Korea and Japan, the audience that I was getting with the business community was significantly higher than the audience I used to get as a macro trader.
So you've traded. You've been part of companies as they built businesses, Goldman, Fortress. The one thing you haven't ever done before is be a CEO.
That's true.
How's that going?
I'm learning. I'm a really good sales guy. I'm a really good speculator, and I'm learning to be more of a manager. And to be fair, I know my weaknesses, and so I'm putting into team in place to try to supplement the things that I'm not as good at. Putting a team together is a challenge. Building businesses isn't easy, and you don't go in a straight line. You make mistakes, you pivot, and so it's an exciting part of it. But ask me that question in a year, and I'll tell you how I'm doing as a CEO.